All right, so to start our roux, I have the burner on medium heat because we are cooking with dairy. We don't want to go above that medium heat. And then I'm going to melt my butter. Once the butter is melted, I will add in my flour and show you the roux. So now that my butter is melted, I'm going to add in my flour. Remember, a roux is equal amounts of fat and flour. So I have 4 tablespoons of butter, which is a 1/4 cup. So then I added my 1/4 cup of flour in. Now we're going to just whisk it all together. It will get kind of clumpy. You just want to whisk those clumps down. That's what's going to make the roux. So I'm just going to keep whisking for about 2 minutes. So once all of the flour clumps are whisked out of our roux, and you see mainly bubbles, then it's time to add in your liquid. So a roux is the base for many soups and sauces. Today we're going to use it as the sauce for macaroni and cheese. So I'm going to slowly add in some of my milk and my broth. Now you can see as I pour it in, it's going to start forming some clumps again. And I really want to make sure I'm incorporating all of the milk into the roux. So just a little bit at a time, and then I'm going to keep stirring to incorporate it all together, and then I'll add in some more. So now it's real clumpy. Just going to keep adding a little bit in at a time. You want to make sure you're getting it all incorporated. We don't want to remove these clumps, we just want to break them down. Now I'm going to start adding in the chicken broth. Once all of the liquid is incorporated in, then you're just going to continue to stir until the sauce starts to thicken. So once it starts to thicken, I'll show you the consistency and how it's going to change. Right now we have a very fluid sauce. We don't want that fluid sauce for our macaroni and cheese. So how we're going to test our roux to see how thick it is you're going to take a rubber scraper and you're going to scrape from one side of the pan to the other. You can see as I'm scraping here, I don't see any of the bottom of the pan. That's how we know it's really liquid. So we're going to wait and keep whisking until it starts to thicken. You can see the roux is still pretty liquid, but we can see the bubbles are forming and they're breaking the surface. So we're going to keep whisking it down. Once we see those bubbles start to form, it is going to go a little bit quicker. So here's just another rubber scraper test. Still can't really see a whole lot of the pan. So we're going to keep breaking it down a little bit more and heating it up to a thicker sauce. So my roux sauce has thickened to a point that I am going to add in the cheese. Once the cheese is added in, it'll continue to thicken from there. But you can see here, if I drag my rubber scraper, it does leave a pretty good tail behind it of the pan itself. So I am going to turn the heat off here. I'm going to set my whisk aside, and I'm going to put my shredded sharp cheddar cheese in. Now, the reason I put my whisk aside is because as the cheese is melting, I don't want all that cheese getting stuck on the inside of my whisk. So I'm just going to use a rubber scraper for this step. I did not add the green onions in. I don't have green onions at home right now. So we're going to omit that step. And I just skipped right to the cheese. And then it's going to all incorporate in. Alright, so now that all of my cheese is incorporated in, the next step that I am going to do is I'm going to take my pasta and I'm going to dump my pasta into my cheese sauce so that I can incorporate it all together. And I'm just gonna continue to stir and break the noodles apart so that they can all get covered in the cheese sauce. Now that all of my noodles are covered in the cheese sauce, the next step is adding it to the baking pan. I'm then gonna broil it with the breadcrumbs on top just to give the breadcrumbs some added crunch. We're gonna scrape out as much of the cheesy goodness as possible. And then I'm just gonna kind of spread it out a little bit. From there, I am going to take my breadcrumbs and I'm gonna add my breadcrumbs onto the top of my macaroni and cheese. And the breadcrumbs did have some melted butter in them, just to add some flavor to them. So now that my breadcrumbs are on my baking dish, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in my oven to broil. So newer ovens are a little bit different. Some of them have the broiling on the bottom in the drawer. Mine is still up on the top. So I've removed my rack as far up to the top as I could without getting it so the pan would hit the broiler. And then I'm just going to slide it in. So as you can see, I'm just going to let it sit there for a little bit. When you're broiling, you never want to close the door tight. So I'm just gonna let those breadcrumbs crunch up a little bit and I'll show you the final product in just a minute. All right, so there is the final product. The breadcrumbs just browned a little bit to add a little bit of crunch to it. And that is mac and cheese with a roux.